The third studio album from the British-born singer-songwriter, producer and multi-instrumentalist Devonte Hines, going under the pseudonym Blood Orange, presents an album that is primarily focused on the topic of identity, about how one looks, feels and presents themselves to the world and the struggles in order to fit in with everyone around them. Going on record, Hines has stated that the album also deals with the issue of queer and black identity, a theme that if you look deeply enough, you'll be able to see these issues recurring in some of the songs on Freetown Sound, the album's name relating to the capital of Sierra Leone, the birthplace of Hines' father. I would be remiss not to highlight that whilst this album's intentions are good and the album in and of itself isn't bad at all, some tracks don't always leave a satisfying conclusion for me. Hines also goes on record stating that the album doesn't go out of its way to search for the answers of how to bring everybody together, only to emphasise the message of staying true to oneself and not altering yourself in order to fit a particular identity. This is made clear on the opening spoken monologue by ourselves, delivered by poet Ashley Hayes, concerning body types, to not feel as though you need to conform to a particular outlet's idea of what beauty looks like, and to not be ashamed of your size, citing Missy Elliott as one of her key role models growing up. Other songs that deal with similar themes are found on tracks like Best to You featuring Empress of, where she states that if compromising who she is in order to fit some man's idea of what he wants, then she'd rather not be with him in the first place. The song Chance, which includes a section about a white woman wearing her hair in braids and a shirt with the words Thug Life on it, a hint towards how some people wear items of clothing brandishing words where that person may not necessarily know the historical context behind said phrase. Again, wearing the item because in their mind they're fitting in with those around them. The album does deviate away briefly from accepting oneself and addresses the more bitter side of not fitting in. This is noticeable on the song Better Than Me featuring guest vocalist Carly Rae Jepsen, a song that highlights the jealousy that some experience when accepting their frustration with not fitting a certain criteria of a specific clique, and despite knowing that things can turn around, it doesn't subtract that stinging feeling. It's unashamedly honest and shows that despite spreading the message of acceptance and loving one for oneself, Hines is still prone to the occasional pang of envious emotions. And the aforementioned queer identity themes show up on a few occasions, most notably on the songs Augustine, although it's only slightly hinted at in the chorus and the main body of the song relates to black individuals who were once owned as slaves, and Desiree, which uses a montage of clips from the 1990 documentary called Paris is Burning by director Jenny Livingston, which does deal with sexual orientation. But as mentioned, this particular theme will be found if you are willing to go out of your way and really pick it out of any track with the most tenuous of connections. Another issue this album faces is the lyrical simplicity. I've always been a stickler when it comes to songs where lyrically they're pretty bare bones and on paper look very underwritten. Usually an underwritten simple song can work with me, but only if it hits me with a certain emotional resonance. On this album, that's not always the case. Hell, some songs are highly repetitive, look unfinished, and a few have audio samples crammed in to try and sneak in some political message, and that has the adverse effects of some tracks coming off as awkward. You want examples? Check out tracks like Love Ya featuring Bob Marley's granddaughter Zuri, Hands Up, which is essentially a loved song but crams in the don't shoot rallying cry that's become prominent amongst the Black Lives Matter movement, Squash Squash, which along with Love Ya is another underwritten song, and the album's closing track, Better Numb, easily the worst track on the album. Not only does it read as though it was constructed within 2 minutes, but the overall presentation of the track is so reverb heavy, and then for some reason decides to end on a funk breakdown only to wind up a glitchy mess. And that's only 4 tracks. Believe me, there are more. Instrumentally, this is where the album tends to shine the most and acts as the glue to this album, because if not for the instrumentation, this album could have been disastrous in its overall presentation. The album focuses primarily on R&B whilst throwing in elements of funk and synth pop as well, and there are some solid moments to be found. The off-kilter percussion with keyboard synth lines, hints of a bass guitar and horn section on Chance has a nice smoothness going on. E.V.P is just oozing with a fantastic funk vibe delivered by the keyboards, a great guitar lick and dirty bass line that when teamed up with the deep vocal delivery, it sends shivers up my spine. But You, introducing bongos, another great bass line with electric guitar and ever-present synth in the background with Hines' gentle vocal delivery, it's simply sublime. The bongos show up again on Juicy 1-4, opting for a more minimalistic vibe with prominent keyboards and bass guitar, and Thank You with its use of woodwind instruments that should have been used more, but the piano solo at the end does well to make up for the lack of horns. And whilst the more minimal sounds on tracks like Hadron Collider and Better Than Me work because the tone of the vocal deliveries complement the lyrics and music perfectly, that's not always the case. I Know is one of the worst offenders, going for an ambient vibe with its combination of piano and synth keyboard, and the overall result is pretty sleep-inducing. Desiree, where all you got going on is a preset drum beat, keyboard, and bass line that sounds like it's only consisting of 2 notes, and as previously mentioned, Better Numb, which is pretty much a nightmare of production choices. But look, I don't think for 1 second this is a bad album. In fact, when this album is good, it's great. What I would say is that this project isn't consistent all the way through. If the songs are going to be basic and underwritten deliberately, then you need something tangible and memorable in the music in order to bypass this problem. Otherwise, it's going to come off as meandering and above all else, lazy. There are without a doubt more strong moments here than weak ones, and it's understandable to see why so many professional outlets have lauded this album as one of this year's best. But for me, there are too many choppy moments and use of audio snippets, some feeling like they don't even fit in with the overarching theme of the album, and underwritten tracks where, unfortunately, the music cannot help but highlight the flaws even more. Nevertheless, the intention here is good, and I do recognise that its heart is in the right place, and when it works really well. Overall, I score this album a 74 out of 100.